Let's cut to the chase. Games are really challenging to make. Half of the time you feel lost if you don't have a guiding light. So here I am with a series where I make a game and I tell you about its process, but not just what I did, but also why I did it. Why did I take the decisions that I took even when the other idea felt better? When do you know to scrap a feature and when to hold on to it? Join me to understand the untold details of game development as I design and create my game Phsycho Baby. Phsycho Baby is a fast-paced action movement shooter with parkour mechanics. I know, you have heard this a lot. And there are lots of movement shooters out there, so we need to differentiate a game from the others. So what will we do? Well, it's quite simple. We followed a few things while creating this game. The idea of Phsycho Baby came to me when I was having a conversation with my girlfriend. I was telling her a new game idea I have and she was totally bored. And when I asked her why, she said, why do games need to have a story? Why can I just not pick up a controller and just play? She's not quite wrong though. A little bit, but not quite much, as every other game that is being made is telling about their story first and then the gameplay. So an idea struck. I shared it with my team and they came back with some ideas. Everything felt boring. Every idea was just a copy-paste of another game. A feature from this, a feature from there. But the idea that struck in my mind was something my art director said. He said, it's not a feature or anything, but I just want to add a shark looking like a Monopoly guy smoking a cigar in a phone booth. That is the most absurd thing that I have heard till date. And that was the whole point. Out of all the ideas, that was the idea that stayed with me. So we decided to follow it. We landed on a very unique concept. Designing a game which has no meaning and no rules. A game that should feel like it was made when the devs were high. This wasn't as easy as we thought. Thinking about things with no meaning on purpose is actually more difficult than you think. Your brain continuously tries to make sense of things. This is kind of a problem as a game developer, but that is your job. Design around the problem. This method actually helped us a lot to open up our minds to fresh ideas. It is basically an act of trial and error. So the practice can go in either of ways. Think about a cool feature that you want to add or a particular feeling you want your player to feel. Then go online and watch some videos or movies that have the same vibe as the feeling you want your player to feel, but totally different genre and medium. The other way is the opposite. Watch something that has no connection to what you're making and grab ideas for what you're making. There is a belief I have, and that is, you can learn about anything from anywhere. So what this exercise does is that it helps you to think out of the bounds of your game and the little bubble of your gaming world, or whatever you're making. If you still haven't understood, I'll give you an example. Let's say you want to make a game with sci-fi guns or guns that don't exist in real life. And you want to balance them, or you don't understand what the fire rate should be. Or you want the guns to feel like they belong to the same category in your game's armory. So go online, listen to some songs that give out the same energy as you want your players to feel. Or the best option is to get your game's theme music and use the drums of the music as the reference to your gun's fire rate. You can balance them later on, but it gives you a wide range of fire rates and a good head start. So how did this technique help us? This movie from Ghibli Studios gave us the idea of how our enemies should look. Can't deny, a humanoid pig with gangster vibe is kinda dope. Another example is this gold lady from Love, Death and Robots dancing over the water. Imagine having a fight on top of a lake where you are fighting a boss that fights you not by shooting or hitting you with a sword, but by dancing. Sounds intriguing, doesn't it? It is basically a job of watching something and asking yourself, how can I add this in the game? Thinking about cool stuff is one thing, but implementing is the real task. How do I make it fit is what you need to ask yourself after you have discovered something amazing. You don't need to straight away think of a place to position this idea. You can take your time, note it down and bring it out when the time is right. Kind of like a mini arsenal of thoughts. Sounds like a cool band name, Arsenal of Thoughts. Usually, I tend to make a design document before starting any project, but this time I thought of skipping it as I want to avoid the traditional ways of developing a game as much as possible. After laying down the basic idea, I started the development. I started by making the base movement of the player. Since the game is fast-paced action shooter, the first thing I did is increase the base speed in the movement logic. Every time you test your speed in an empty room, you will feel like the character is slow. So I quickly made a small room which will be the average size of the levels in my game. I added some simple shapes like cube and cylinder to fill up the level, as this will give us the reference of how fast we are actually going. The way to test your speed at this level is by trying to move between the objects. Your goal should be easy movement and not to hit the obstacles in between. This also gives you a sense of how much negative space you need in your levels in order to smoothly maneuver. This space will need tweaking later on as we will add the combat. Once the movement feels satisfying to us, we can move on to the next aspect of the game feel, and that is the camera. If you feel like the camera is not important, I highly recommend you to watch this video from Game Maker's Toolkit. To understand what I need to do with the camera, I try to figure out what feeling I want the player to feel. What I need is the player to feel the sense of speed. So I increase the camera lag to make it feel like the character is so fast that the camera has to catch up to it. I did get carried away with the value, as you will see when I show you the sliding mechanic. So the next basic things are the jumps. There are two actions I added related to the jump: a double jump and a wall bounce. Double jump is fairly simple, as I just use this setting in the character movement to input the number of jumps I want to add. Wall bounce, on the other hand, is quite different. I am highly inspired by the wall bounce in Apex Legends, although it is not a desired feature but kind of a bug in Apex. I wanted to add this as an actual feature in my game, but there lied a problem when I started to write the code for it. Since Apex is a first-person shooter, you always jump off the wall you are looking at. The camera is always pointing to the wall you are going to jump off of. But since my game is third person, what if the camera is looking at the wall but the player is looking in the opposite direction? It will look cool to jump towards a wall, rotate 180 and jump off of it. I created and tested it and it felt unintuitive. So I decided to use the code from my parkour system. Now I have a spear trace coming out from my character and shooting it out in the movement direction. Once it hits something, it will check if the other thing is big enough to be a wall. If yes, then a force will be added to the character in the normal direction of the wall. This will modify further, as the same code is used to make the base of the parkour mechanic. We shoot out the same spear trace, but then we add a few more small spear traces one above the other until one of them doesn't touch anything. The number of spear traces is up to you, how tall of an object you want the player to climb. Now from the point of the last hit trace, we take a point about 100 meters above and start tracing downwards. And we use the same technique and check if it hits anything again. If it does, then we know our player needs to mantle, and if it doesn't, then we know our player needs to vault. Also, it is highly advised that you keep the traces the same radius as your player's capsule collision, as this will make sure that your player doesn't vault or mantle into tight spaces and bug out. Last thing I added this week is the slide mechanic. It's basically running but with faster speed and a sliding animation. Now you can see how I got carried away with the camera lag. But if this feels good, it stays. Sliding is not similar to the other games, as we decided to have slide controlled by a fuel meter rather than have it driven by the momentum. You will know why I did it in the later episodes. I always try to develop mechanics which complement each other and are easy to use and hard to master. So one of the pseudo feature we are trying to make is the combination. Combining all these movement mechanics is possible, like jumping off of the ground and doing parkour vault on a thin wall, and then doing a 180, doing a double jump and then wall bouncing off of it. Another thing is, while doing a slide, your jump has a 2x multiplier to give it a sense of momentum. Even the damage taken is reduced the faster you go. If you reach the max speed, which is the max speed of slide, your damage taken is reduced by half. So the faster you are, the less damage you take. These features won't be told to the player, as players might try to exploit it and will find the most boring way to play the game. And also, they might think this is the only correct way to play the game. But when they are unaware of this, they will play the game and run around and find out that they are taking less damage while they might think that they are so good at the game that they are literally dodging the bullets. But this is not the case. Such systems will only encourage the player to use the systems more. Another feature I want to add in the game is something I want to steal from Doom 2016. In Doom 2016, when you move, the enemies miss their shots on purpose. This gives the impression to the player that moving is safer, and the player is subconsciously encouraged to do this more. Game development is like magic. You create illusions to make the player think that they are winning. Hope you have learned something from this video and I have entertained you along the way. Game development is really an interesting job, and I hope I have helped you in solving your problems in your games. Thanks for watching till the end. I'll see you in the next one. Until then, keep playing.